Thanks, Xavier. First, folks, I want to acknowledge I'm hosting another event here at the Delta Fredericton, so there might be some background noise. I apologize for that. But I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar on diversifying trade relationships. My name is Morgan Peters. I'm the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. We're proud to partner with TD Canada Trust and the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton to bring you this information session. In today's interconnected world, diversifying trade relationships is more critical than ever. This session aims to provide valuable insights into how New Brunswick businesses can expand their trade networks, mitigate risks, and seize new opportunities in the global market. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items to cover. Please keep your video and microphones off throughout the webinar to ensure a smooth and uninterrupted experience for everyone. And two, if you have any questions during the presentations, feel free to use the chat function. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end where our speakers will address your questions. We hope you find today's session informative and engaging. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Tracy Simmons, the CEO of Opportunities New Brunswick. Tracy brings a wealth of experience and knowledge in fostering economic growth and trade opportunities for businesses in New Brunswick. Please join me in welcoming Tracy.
Thank you, Morgan, and welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here today and to have the opportunity. Thank you to the chambers and your respective teams for allowing us this opportunity to connect with the business community around a really important topic of tariffs. So thank you again. And in terms of our involvement on the tariff front, as you might imagine, it has been an all hands on deck moment, I think both for the public sector, but also for our private sector. And I commend the private sector leaders and business associations for standing up to be responsive to business needs at this time. Senior leaders across government have been very much aware and working hard on the tariff front going back into last fall. As Alexa Power will explain in more detail in a bit, we have ONB and the government of New Brunswick have launched what we feel is a strong support program that's going to be there for businesses if and when the worst case scenario comes to pass. As the province's lead development agency, we remain in close contact with client companies and other stakeholders. And if our support needs to be modified or expanded, we're open to taking those requests and needs forward to government at that point in time. I am happy to say that export diversification and export development is not a new file to ONB. We have been working hard on the file for about the last 10 years. And really at ONB, the team and Alexa, when she will speak to it, that we help companies enter new markets beyond Canada and the US all the time. Interest, obviously, in this service has grown over recent months. We launched our new webinar series on tariffs a few weeks back, and the turnout was very strong. And I invite anybody on the line, if you have an interest in taking part in future programming, just please check out our website or follow our social channels. We've had a number of webinars over the last couple months, and we'll continue to do that based on the interest areas of companies or the pressure points or clarifications that they need. I know with so much uncertainty, often it's information, and that is what businesses are looking for. And so we want to be that conduit to the best information we can provide you. So please subscribe if you have interest. What I will say is I think that this is an opportunity in the sense that I feel like there's general recognition that perhaps we had too many of our eggs in one basket with the US relationship. With that, we have seen increased demand and interest in our programming. Companies are very much wanting to see what they can do to grow and diversify beyond the US. And so we do have a number of products that Alexa will speak to and efforts underway to support businesses in that. We currently have 2 geographic markets that we've been trying to grow on a strategic basis, both in France and India. We've been in those markets for some time. We're the only Atlantic province that actually has full-time dedicated staff in India whose job number one is to represent New Brunswick interests and in growing an economic relationship in that country. And then also we have a dedicated resource in Paris, who again is there to support New Brunswick companies and interest in that market. So we also recognize that there's been a real increase in interest and need for easier trading between provinces. Leaders in every province and territory are committed to ensuring Canadian goods cross internal borders with less friction. We're very much involved on that file. We're seeing that there's been some rapid movements. And so we will continue to support any of the work in tearing down those barriers going forward. We also are standing up some programming that will help connect New Brunswick businesses into some of those opportunities that might exist in other provinces. So that will be something that you will see more of going forward. So, I'd like to think that although the U.S. partnership is going to be with us for a long time, they're a very important customer. I think this has renewed interest in us being able to grow beyond the U.S. relationship. And you're going to see more and more efforts from the OMB front to support companies that want to do that. So, what we know is that companies here in the province make great products, and really they can compete anywhere in the world. So it's just about us connecting those businesses to the opportunity. So I don't really have anything additional to add beyond that, Morgan. I just want to again thank everybody for being here. Thank our partners for pulling this together. And I hope that there's a great session today.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Certainly agree with those comments. Appreciate your engagement and willingness to chat of you and your team now more than ever. Now I'm going to turn things over to James Lundergan, Senior Relationship Manager with TD Commercial Banking here in Fredericton. James, over to you.
Thank you, Morgan, and good morning, everybody. First, I want to be able to start off on behalf of the TD Commercial Banking across New Brunswick and PEI. On behalf of my colleagues, I want to thank everybody for taking the time today. I think protecting our businesses is vital. It's the backbone of our communities. And I think right now is kind of a call to action, I would think, for all professionals and those who serve or advise businesses right now. Because as we look at diversifying trade relationships, that's going to represent different risks. It's going to have some impact on working capital. It's going to have impact on profitability. And I think for a long time, because the way we've done business, making these changes could be a little bit of a shock for some companies. And I think along the way, it's important that we look at other opportunities or different ways that we can help companies through this and mitigate some of those risks, and a reminder of some of the other solutions that are out there. The other thing I want to do is I want to be able to thank the chambers for St. John, Fredericton, and Moncton, and across the province, really, particularly these three chambers right now. I think it's great to be able to see the leadership and a reminder here that I think that all ships rise. So as we work through this, I think it's important that we have, whether it's Opportunities New Brunswick, Export Development Canada, and we look at all the charter banks and lenders that are out there, that this is a time to be able to really look at how we not only buy local, but we support local. So I want to thank everybody for the leadership here. And I guess the other benefit for me in terms of working for TD Canada Trust is that, our business bank has access to lots of professionals. And I really want to thank my colleague, actually, Axel Mansour, who's with us today. He's a trade finance specialist. And he's here in New Brunswick with me because we see the opportunity here for advice, and hopefully we're able to help. So I guess if we got to our presentation, Monique, I believe you could add it up. Perfect. And if we can go to the next slide. A couple of key messages and objectives here. Trading on open account, it does represent risks. And the thing is, anytime you're going to provide a good or a service and you're waiting to get paid after the fact, there's certain risks that are going to be there. And across Atlantic Canada right now, there's a lot of trade that is done on open account. And the thing is, we've had long-term trading partners. But as you work with with new trade partners, the thing is, you don't know them. And the thing is, what can you do around that to be able to ensure creditworthiness and also be able to look at setting up terms of trade that are going to work? So as mentioned, in Atlantic Canada, a lot of open account trade is happening. And there are different instruments, though, that are used outside of Atlantic Canada mainly and around the world. So there's different instruments to be able to look at how you ensure creditworthiness. We have a very strong banking system in Canada. We understand the banks around the world to be able to who is creditworthy, and be able to look at different ways to set up terms with new trade partners. So this is where we're going to get my colleague Axel Mansur to be able to talk about some trade finance instruments and how they can help. The other thing, I guess, in terms of looking at insurance solutions, EDC, a lot of companies in New Brunswick, they may use the accounts receivable insurance, but there's other ways that EDC can help and be able to provide insurance for the help of business, and also be able to look at different ways that you can access more working capital. Because along the way, as you engage in working with different trade partners, they may introduce concepts around you wanting to have a letter of credit or a letter of guarantee in place, and this might be something that you haven't done before. And you may also have an opportunity here to be able to revisit what your credit needs are really going to be. And you may have to talk to your lenders and your relationship managers to be able to renegotiate or be able to change the terms of your credit agreements. And this is a tool that can help. And I guess finally, the other message here is, this is the great thing about being a small but mighty province. We have a number of great professionals that are here on the line with us right now. And I think, again, we can all work together here to be able to make sure we find some solutions to help businesses. So there are supports that are here that we're going to talk, and you're going to hear from Alexa later on today around opportunities to Brunswick and different programs to help. And, there is also a federal response out there right now if these tariffs do come into effect to be able to help those businesses that are out there. And I'm sure there'll be more information as we go along. Next slide. So looking at just some fundamental messages here before we talk about more about trade finance solutions, I want to come back to some fundamental pieces here, I think. First, looking at your online banking, making sure that you establish financial controls for your business and you instill a culture of fraud awareness. A lot of businesses out there right now are experiencing phishing, and there are also different things that we're seeing happening where if you're into an open internet access, a public internet, that represents different risks as well. So we're seeing fraud in that front as well. So it's just something to be cautious about and look at how you're transacting. The other thing to mention as we go into establishing new relationships, there are services around a business credit check services. So what this is companies say such as Equifax or TransUnion, they do have business solutions where you're able to validate the banking relationships that a new trade partner has and ensure that they are creditworthy, or get some sense to be able to, okay, is this somebody that we can open an account with and do some trade with? The other thing on this is that I think this is a time really for financial advice. So if you evaluate and you look at, the impact of tariffs on your business, import and export perspective, I think it's going to be, this really is a time to review your cash flow needs and be able to really understand your cash flow and what the impact of any tariffs would have on it. So I was speaking with Charles Gadet, actually. He's a trade commissioner, global affairs, and I asked him about some of the resources that are available. So to the right, the image here, the Weathering the Storm, Canadian SME Playbook for Navigating U.S.-Canada Tariffs. This was a great document that he shared with me. And what it does is it allows you to be able to establish your own playbook for your business to understand the impact of tariffs on each side and to be able to give a guide as to formulating a plan. So at the end of this session, all participants will receive an email with this document, as well as another document around how to protect your business from fraud. And with that, we'll go forward. So some of the common challenges I think that are going to come about as we establish new trade relationships. So some of the things that we might run into scenarios where, say, a new supplier wants full payment up front, but your cash conversion cycle might be a longer period, say the 90 days or more. So how can I manage this? Also looking at how can I ensure payment from a new trade partner? You might also get into implications of dealing with different currencies. And we know currency fluctuates daily, all the time. So there are different ways that you can mitigate risk and be able to protect your margins in terms of looking at hedging. And also, I guess if you're dealing with another country, is that country reliable? Do we understand its banking system so that payments are made? Also, I guess you might get into scenarios as well where you may need an increase in your line of credit because your current margin formula will not allow for the more working capital that you're going to need. So hopefully with that, we'll be able to answer a few of these questions as we look at some trade finance solutions and talk about them, and also look at different things that are available in terms of some risk mitigants and insurance products. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Axel Mansur. He is a trade finance specialist, a director over TD over in Montreal. Over to you, Axel.
Thank you, James, and hi everyone. My name is Axel, and I'm the specialist for international trade for TD Bank. As a part of our mandate, what we do is we do help our clients on a day-to-day basis for their challenges in the international markets, mainly by doing two things. So the first thing is mitigating the risks, and the second thing is increase their finding outside of the box solution to increase the working capital. So if we can please go to the next slide, Dominique. Yeah, next one, please. Again. Thank you. So we're going to start with those two common questions that this presentation will address. But in a nutshell, the first one is, I just signed a new contract and I want to ensure that I get paid. How do I make this possible? And the second one is, my line of credit is capped and I have a cash conversion cycle issue. How do I do to negotiate better terms of payment with my suppliers? So during the presentation, the tools that we're going to use are going to help you to address those questions. So if we go to the next slide, the first one, we're going to speak about what is trade. Then after, what are the type of product that we use? What are the type of risk that we cover? And then we'll just end on the trade stage and the tariff just on a small note. So Dominique, can you pass on to the next slide, please? Okay, so trade finance. What is trade? Trade finance is quite easy. It's just the financing and the support of the flow of goods and services in and out of the country, so inside and outside Canada. Usually what we need is we always have one buyer and one seller, right? So depending of if you're the buyer or seller, you might transact in two type of solution. The first one will be on open account basis, which means that the seller will send the goods directly to the buyer, but he will have full trust into the buyer. And then the opposite is the advance payment, where the buyer will send the money in advance, but he has to have a full trust into the seller. But if the seller or the buyer run away with the goods or the money, then you're on the hook, right? So the intent is to mitigate those risks. So open an account and advance payment are working well whenever you know the client that you're dealing with on the other side. But if you don't, then it's more complicated. So in between those, the first solution that we have is called documentary collection, also known as document against payment sometimes, that you might hear about. In a nutshell, it's still the bank just acts as a channel. So you sign an agreement with your seller or your buyer, let's say. The seller will send on the goods, and for the buyer to clear the goods, he needs the document. So the seller will ask the bank, will use the banking channel to send the document, and the bank will receive them. On the buyer side, they will just ask the buyer, I have documents for you, do you want them or not? If the buyer says yes, the banks debit the account, pay, and send the documents to the seller, to the buyer. But if the buyer says no, then you're on the hook. So it's more risky for the seller, but not for the buyer. And then in between all this, to mitigate fully the risk, we have what we called and what is known as letters of credit and letters of guarantee. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So if we have to make it simple, we have two types of letters of credit. So the first one is called commercial LC, while the second one is called letters of guarantee / standby letters of credit. The main differentiator is that one of them, which are the commercial LCs, are instrument being used to pay. So it's an instrument of payment, while the letters of guarantee or standby LC are instrument of default. So say if you are a buyer and you want to buy something from a seller that you don't know, then you're going to ask the bank to issue a letter of credit, which is a commercial LC. So what you're going to do is you go to your bank, you ask them, the bank will issue that commercial LC through the bank of the seller. The bank of the seller will receive it and advise it to the seller, and then the seller will just have a look. The commercial LC will ask for a couple of documentation. As soon as the goods are being sent out and shipped, the seller will present those documents to the bank. And if complying, then the bank just pays and surrender the documents to the buyer so that he can clear the goods. So everyone is happy. And the bank here takes an undertaking to pay against the presentation of the documents. So the buyer is make sure that he gets his goods, and the seller makes sure he gets his money. And well, the second one is more of an instrument of default. So standby letters of credit or letters of guarantee are instrument of default. You can use it to provide credibility under a contract. So say you're bidding on a contract for an RFP, and the beneficiary, which might be a government, might ask you for a letter of guarantee. So this is it. You're going to ask your bank to issue this. So if you fail under the contract at some point, the bank will just pay, and the beneficiary will be happy because they have a certainty that you won't withdraw under the contract. You can use it for RFPs. You can use it to replace a deposit, but you can use it as well to negotiate better terms of payment with your supplier. So instead of sending, say, a wire every time, if you know how much you're ordering from the same supplier, you ask him, to provide you payment terms in exchange for a letter of guarantee valid for the year. And then if after the terms is reached, if you don't pay, then they're gonna claim on the letter. But in a nutshell, it allows you to sell the goods before you pay your supplier. So those are the main differentiators. One is an instrument of payment, and the other one is an instrument of default. Can we go to the next slide, please? So now we're going to talk about the risk. So you have mainly 4 types of risk whenever you're transacting overseas. The first two ones are the payment and the performance. So payment is the seller failed to deliver the goods, or the seller fails to pay on due date, or the performance is the seller fails to deliver the goods. So those can be mitigated with the commercial LC. So because the bank ensure that you get paid and the other party get their goods. You also have the political risk. So say if you're dealing with a country and you're afraid that there might be war or civil disturbances, this might prevent the shipment from being made, right? So how do we mitigate that? So if you're asking for a commercial LC from your bank, what the bank can do as well is, if the bank is if you're afraid because the bank in the other country cannot pay if there is a political issue, we as TD or your financial institution can take on the risk of that bank to make sure that if there is a default, then we will pay on their behalf. So that's one thing that we can do as well. And then last but not least, it's the foreign exchange conversion and transfer risk. So these does translate into your receivables or payable, right? So if you're buying or selling from overseas, you're gonna sell in or buy in another currency. So if that currency decreases or increases, then you're gonna be on the hook because you're gonna lose money. So the intent here is that we have tools that allows you to protect your purchases or your sales to make sure that you don't lose any money. So if we have to summarize those are the main 4 type of risks that we might have. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the last slide is more to reflect on what are the steps to export and what can we do with the current issues that we're having right now with our neighbor in the south. So 3 steps to export. The first one usually is the access to information. So if you have never done export before, the first point is to build up an export plan. So how do we help you to do that? There are a couple of programs that are helping you to do that. In the Atlantic provinces, you have a program which is sponsored by EDC and the government. It's sponsored by the Halifax Chamber of Commerce here for Atlantic, and it's open to all the Atlantic provinces. It's called the Trade Accelerator Program. So it's a program that costs usually $5,000 per application, but it's free for this year. And the program goes over a 7 days cohort where they teach you how to build up an export plan, and you have a couple of consultant company as well coming to advise you. So that's the first step. Obviously, when you reach out that first step, the second step is to find a buyer, and the buyer, James has touched on that, credit worthiness. There are a couple of institutions that can help you to see if a buyer is reliable or not. EDC is one of them, and Brian will touch on that later on. And then the third, last but not least, is the financing. So whenever you find the buyer or the seller, then you come to your bank and we help you to structure and to structure the transaction properly. So risk will be different according to the stage you're at and according to what you're able to support as well. So it depends on everyone. And if we have to end up on the tariff and the diversification with what's happening right now, the message will be, and there is a big push on that from the past few weeks to try to diversify. If you're working a lot with the States, try to look for new markets. Canada has sign more than 15 trade agreements. So we do have a lot of agreements with other countries, especially Europe and Indo-Pacific. So try to leverage on those by leveraging on the partners. ONB is there to help you. You have EDC as well. And the last thing is we need to make sure that we cover our purchases and the sales as well. So whenever you transact overseas, always make sure that you want to cover yourself for the fluctuation of the currency, because if it does fluctuate, then you might lose some money. So on that note, I will pass it over to Brian, who is going to talk about the insurance solution and how to manage the risk. Brian, you're on mute.
Yep. Thanks, Axel. Just gonna wait for the presentation to come up here. Well, while it is coming up, I'll give a quick high-level overview of EDC. So EDC Export Development Canada, we are a federal crown corporation. We have a mandate to support exporters who are looking to grow and succeed internationally. We've been around for over 80 years. And from a presence perspective, we have offices throughout the country. For New Brunswick, I am based in New Brunswick. I have some colleagues here as well representing EDC for the province. And then we also have colleagues throughout the world, typically located at the consulates with the trade commissioners, and their role is to assist Canadian companies in those markets. So go to the next slide, please. Okay. And the next one. So quickly, just who is an exporter and the type of companies that we can support. So we kind of bucket into a few different categories. The first is probably what most people think of when you think of what an exporter is. It's a direct exporter where you're either physically shipping product across the Canadian border, whether it be into the US or Europe or over into Asia. You could be performing a service for an international company. So quite simply, you're getting paid by a non-Canadian company, whether, like I said, you're physically shipping product or it's a software or you're providing a service. But then there's a lot of companies that would fall under the second bucket here, an indirect exporter, that maybe don't quite realize that, they would be considered an exporter. An indirect exporter is someone who is part of a supply chain, an export supply chain. I use an example, here in New Brunswick, it's pretty topical. In the seafood industry, there's a lot of oyster harvesters, for example, in New Brunswick, who they harvest their oysters and they might sell them all to another company in New Brunswick. So if you just look at it through that narrow lens, they don't export, but then the company who they sell to is a major exporter. So their product, they're not exporting their product, but the company who buys them is exporting the product. So at the end of the day, they're part of an export supply chain. Then they're eligible for support, just like companies who are exporting directly. We can also support companies who are maybe not exporting today, but they've kind of put some work into developing an export plan, and they believe, reasonably within the next 3 years that the export, could be a component of their business. And then finally, there's a number of companies who they physically invest outside of Canada, whether it be maybe a manufacturing plant or they could have a sales office. So again, many different ways to export, and we're here to support all of them. Go to the next slide. Our support really falls into, I would say, 4 buckets: financing, so helping Canadian companies get access to capital; insurance, which offers protection and lowers the risk associated with exporting; knowledge, we have an advisory team who provides expertise that enables companies to make informed decisions on entering new markets and exporting. And then finally, connections. We have a lot of connections throughout the world that can be used to help you grow your business there as well. Next slide. So the first solution that I'm going to talk about is EDC credit insurance, so receivables insurance, when you're offering open account payment terms. So you're shipping product or providing a service and then getting paid later. So we'll go to the next slide on this. So Canadian companies may hesitate to sell to international customers due to the risk of non-payment. It can be considerably more difficult to collect outstanding receivables from a company in a foreign jurisdiction for a variety of reasons. Distance for one, you can't go kind of knock on their door and try to collect payment if they're not answering. The legal jurisdiction can be different, so a variety of reasons. This really limits a company's growth potential. Often financial institutions are also reluctant to lend to exporting companies for the same reason. There's more risk. So both the exporter and the bank will want to ensure that the exporter does get paid. So one thing that you can do is you can get credit insurance, receivables insurance for 90% of the insured loss against the risk of non-payment. So should the customer cancel the contract or be unable to pay, or if there's political instability in the market, and that's why they're not paying, again, there's a variety of risks that are covered, but essentially what it is you're shipping product or you're performing a service, you invoice them, and then they don't pay you. So you can get a claim payment for 90% if it was using round numbers. If it was $100,000 contract, you don't get paid. You can get a claim payment from EDC for 90%, and then we'll work with you. We'll work with a collection agency to still go after the invoiced amount as well. And if we're able to collect on that, we'll share that back with you as well. So it's available to exporters of all sizes. It can be taken out for a single contract or for an entire book of business. It could be your first ever export, your first ever contract outside of the country, where you want to make sure that you get paid and protect yourself. You can use it for that. Or you could be a seasoned exporter and really just looking, again, to mitigate some of the risks, or potentially looking to get more financing from your bank. So, some of the benefits, because the payment is insured, that you can rest easy knowing that if the customer doesn't pay, EDC will. Exporters you can often be more competitive by offering longer payment terms. So sometimes if maybe you're competing against someone else for a piece of business, product might be somewhat similar, but if you're able to offer longer payment terms, that might be more attractive to your potential buyer. And you're able to offer those payment terms because, with the insurance that, one way or another, you're going to get paid. And then finally, banks, when they're lending, on an operating line, typically without insurance on foreign receivables outside of Canada and the US, they give you zero value. So take the example of a $100,000 receivable. If it was a receivable over maybe in the Indo-Pacific region or in Europe, South America, you have to wait, 30, 60, 90, however many days for that payment to come in. Meanwhile, you have probably a number of costs, associated with running your business. Whereas if you insure those receivables, the bank will then lend 90% against that receivable. So you get 90% value and have that as working capital available. Go to the next slide. Working capital guarantees, certainly very, topical here with companies who are looking to continue to grow outside of Canada. And, whether that's exploring new markets, diversifying into new markets, there's a lot of support that can be available to help you do that. Go to the next slide. Most popular program, we have a lot of Canadian companies that want to grow through international expansion. They often lack the working capital to make that happen. Generally, they'll approach the bank for a line of credit or a loan, and the bank might be unable to do that just based on the risks associated with international expansion. So EDC has solutions where we can partner with the bank to allow the bank to increase the financing that they give you. We work on a variety of kind of risk sharing or even risk transfer guarantees for the bank. So it takes some of the risk away from the bank and allows them to provide you with some of this financing. So go to the next slide. Most popular solution here would be our export guarantee program. So again, where you're maybe struggling to access financing or additional financing through your financial institution due to maybe unpredictable growth or international assets. Or an international element to the company's plans that is beyond the bank's risk tolerance. So the Export Guarantee Program, or the acronym EGP, it's a flexible, customizable guarantee for a range of lending solutions. I would say the bulk of the solutions that we support are operating lines. So maybe you don't have an operating line and you're looking to acquire one. It can be used there. You could have an existing operating line, you're looking to increase it. It can be used in that situation. Could be for equipment, a variety of reasons. You see a few of them listed there, but typically it's, a 75% guarantee, sometimes higher, where we share the risk with the bank. The bank provides you with the financing. And in the background, if ever there were a loss for the bank, we're there to cover, 75% or so of their loss. So it takes some of the risk off their plate such that they can extend more credit to you. Next slide. So this solution in the account performance security guarantee, it goes along with what Axel was describing in regards to standby letters of credit. Typically, when the bank will issue a standby letter of credit, they're going to require some form of collateral for you. So maybe, you're looking to kind of get longer payment terms and you want to issue, you're getting longer payment terms with your supplier. You want to issue a standby letter of credit to the supplier. The bank is going to require collateral. They might carve that out of your operating line, so you no longer have that amount available for working capital on the operating line, or maybe it's cash collateral. Where EDC comes into play is we'll work with your bank. We'll provide them with 100% guarantee. They take our guarantee instead of requiring any collateral from you. They look at us as AAA credit rating Government of Canada guarantee, which is as good as cash. So they'll take our guarantee instead of anything from you, and then you can use that that solution to kind of help you get longer payment terms, or issue advanced payment guarantees or performance guarantees associated with contracts. Next slide. Along the same line, if you're looking to hedge the exchange rate, the foreign exchange rate, we've seen over the last even in the last year, the exchange rate's gone up by nearly probably 25% from 1.3 to 1.45, 1.46. That can create a lot of uncertainty in your business. So what you can do is you can look to hedge that rate. So say in 3 months, you're going to be getting a payment in US dollars. Well, today what that would convert to Canadian dollars at, you don't necessarily know what it would convert at if you were to wait 3 months, what the exchange rate's going to happen. So you can work with your bank or FX traders where they can institute solutions to essentially lock in what you'll convert that at in 3 months. And same idea with the standby letters of credit. Typically, they'll require collateral. We can provide them with 100% guarantee. They take a guarantee from us rather than requiring any collateral from you. Next slide. So knowledge business, if you want to go to the next slide. So we have a variety of different knowledge, non-financial solutions. The best part of all is it's completely free. So if you go to the next slide, it talks about our Export Help Hub. So that's a section of our website. I encourage everyone to go to the website, sign up for a free MyEDC account. And that gives you, access to a variety of different webinars, white papers, economic reports, really anything you can really imagine if you're looking to enter a new market. So you can go, maybe have questions in regards to tariffs, or maybe you're looking to diversify into the Indo-Pacific and you have questions about a market. You can go, and there's actually the ability, you can kind of do a search based on what you're looking for, and all the resources that we have available will come up. And then if for some reason you can't find what you're looking for, there's an option to ask an advisor. So you'll put kind of your question in there, and then an advisor, one of our trade advisors, will get back to you in 3 to 5 days, with an answer to kind of the question that you're looking for. Last slide, please. So again, happy to, in the Q&A period, if there's any questions, happy to discuss how we can help you grow your business and diversify into new markets. Finally, I will next hand it over to Alexa Power. Alexa Power is the director of the export development team with Opportunities New Brunswick, who provides a wealth of solutions for New Brunswick-based businesses.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brian. I just wanted to start out by thanking everyone for joining, taking the time out of your busy days to learn from us today. Wanted to also give a shout out to James for standing up this event. I think it's really important, especially right now, for private and public sector to come together and share information kind of all in one place, because I think it can be a bit overwhelming for companies with all that's on offer. So happy to kind of collaborate here, but also I'll be mentioning kind of throughout my conversation to reach out for a meeting. We often do partner meetings as well, so we can pull in, EDC, TD, GAC, whomever, ACOA, into one conversation to try to make it easier for you folks. So I wanted to start out by saying that. I also wanted to say that my goal today is really just to give you a high level of some of the supports that we can do, not only from a tariff response perspective, but as Tracy mentioned, our team has been focused on goal diversification for many years. So we offer a lot in that regard. So kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of that and encourage you, to reach out and have deeper conversations later. So let's get started. I'll ask to move to the next slide, please. Awesome, thanks. So just wanted to start out really briefly about ONB. Many of you likely know who we are. Tracy mentioned earlier, we're the province's economic development agency. This organization has been around for 10 years this month, so celebrating a birthday. But of course, the province has been doing economic development for much longer, many, many years in different iterations. So I think what's remained the same is that our goal is really to grow the New Brunswick economy, to increase jobs, exports, tax revenue, and of course, one of the ways that we support New Brunswick's growth is through export development. So, of course, as I mentioned, wanted to share a bit more about our team today. So, at a high level, our team's goals are to grow New Brunswick, the number of New Brunswick exporting firms, to increase non-resource sector export revenues, so value-added sectors, primarily B2B, and to diversify markets. So by expanding the number of firms that are exporting, but also total export revenues, and trying to help companies look to different areas to sell their products. So we work with over 400, I'm still on that one, sorry. Thank you. So we work with over 400 New Brunswick exporters. At a high level, we provide tailored business support, financial resources, which I'll get into, training programs, which I'll touch on later, and a lot of market development activities, which I'll give some examples later. So our focus is on high impact exporters, like I mentioned, value-added sectors, really trying to help them accelerate their sales and expand their market reach. We have a focus on sectors like ICT, manufacturing, and energy, but also, like Tracy mentioned earlier, we have a focus on markets. So France and India has been big focuses for us over the last few years. Next slide, please. So our team are export advisors. We provide one-on-one advice on a variety of topics, and that can be anything from market entry strategies to supply chain optimization, information or research on a new market, or how do I make an impact in a specific market. We recognize that every company is sort of at a different stage in what we call the export continuum. So we really try to take a tailored approach here to support the unique needs of the company and meet you where you are at. One client could be struggling to, make an impact at a trade show. How do I optimize a trade show, being at a trade show or a booth? Someone else might need help finding the right partner in market. And we really try to meet them where they're at to overcome these barriers. We understand that export is very challenging, and especially, of course, right now. So part of our role is to really try to help mitigate that risk and use our networks to grow yours. Next slide, please. So that brings me into this connector slide, which is really a big part of what we do. We attend a lot of export development missions, trade shows. We're in market a lot to try to grow the New Brunswick brand for the capabilities in New Brunswick, but we also leverage a lot of in-market partners. So key buyers, importers, distributors, of course, our friends at Global Affairs Canada, in all the regions of the world, basically outside of Canada. So we leverage and work with them a lot. And for us, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it's like building a strong network for us allows us to kind of intro you to those folks. And knowing someone in market is like a gold mine for export. You really need to have a connection in market. And if you can get a free resource, even better, because that reduces the risk, right, of entering a new market. So we try to really leverage our markets for companies. We offer our trade missions that we offer are highly subsidized. It's not direct funding to company, but it's a lower rate for services. So that's kind of how the funding is administered for trade missions. Some of our missions are focused solely on New Brunswick companies, and others are part of Pan-Atlantic initiatives, which some of you may be aware of already. The programs provide opportunities, of course, to network, as I mentioned before, fostering our connections not only across Canada, but around the world. And we also participate in Atlantic collaboration a lot with the ATIGS is the acronym. So it's the Atlantic Trade and Investment Growth Strategy. So while we do a lot for New Brunswick alone, we have signed many agreements with the Atlantic provinces and the feds to deliver programming that fits Atlantic Canada well, and it positions Atlantic Canada as kind of a stronger together message. So a lot of that programming is very impactful for our companies, and we're very lucky to have that partnership, and it's unique across Canada. I'll touch on B2B matchmaking because that's one of the big pieces that we offer as part of our missions, whether that be a trade mission or a specific B2B matchmaking event. We connect New Brunswick businesses with, of course, trade commissioners, like I mentioned, but also buyers. And we would usually hire a consultant to do this B2B matchmaking. Just for example, our team just this week returned from a mission to India, where we had a B2B matchmaker. We also leveraged our in-market resources. We have 2 in India, and provided one-on-one meetings for 5 New Brunswick companies. And what was really nice about this is that having those in-market resources as well as a B2B consultant made it a very robust program and a very supportive program, because going into a market like India can be very daunting for folks. It's a big investment. And so we really handheld those companies throughout the journey. There was, I think it was like a week and a half or 2-week mission, just to help them get a sense of the market, and being in market made a huge difference for them. So we do that all around the world, and including in Canada, that type of event. We also create specific programming. We have a lot of missions, but we also create specific programs based on collective client needs. So my team is out there asking questions, finding commonalities, and saying, what is your biggest bottleneck? What are you struggling with right now? And if we find enough common needs, then we can create a program so that we can offer like a group of companies, for example. So recently, in the last couple of years, we created the Architect Pitch program, which helps companies in the building sector engage with in-market consultants and architects to expand their reach direct with buyers who are architects, which has been very successful. And we've run that kind of multiple times. All right, so next slide, please. Moving on to the tariff approach. Obviously, what's going on right now is very challenging. It's very uncertain. Things seem to be kind of changing daily. And we recognize that it presents big challenges for companies. I think that we should also acknowledge that it creates opportunities. I think that's why it's been so important for government to have such a whole of government approach, where multiple departments have worked together over the last several months to create a response strategy that makes sense for business. And as Tracy mentioned earlier, we've really engaged industry on this, not only government inputs, but industry, to really try to meet business needs. And I think we are continually working on this. And she mentioned that earlier, where we don't have it all figured out yet. We're providing supports that we feel meet the need based on what we're hearing. But if things change and we're hearing different, feedback, then we're adaptable. So I have to say that the collaboration, though, that I've seen across the governments and the departments on this screen has really been quite something. And the effort continues to be a collaborative one. Departments like DAF, which is Agriculture, Aquaculture, Fisheries, Intergovernmental Affairs has been heavily involved. PEDAL, of course, ONB. I think the one thread that binds, well, there's many threads that bind, but the one that sticks out, I think, is that our common goal is really to stabilize the New Brunswick economy, to protect businesses as best we can and to support workers during this challenging time. Yeah, and for us, it's important. What the driver is, I think, to achieve that goal is to support businesses based on their needs. Next slide, please. So how is ONB supporting businesses through the challenges? We understand that it's very important during this time, especially, to stay competitive. So we're here to help businesses navigate the uncertainty. As you can see sort of on this slide here, there are several buckets of relief funding support. So for example, if your business is facing significant revenue loss or working capital challenges because of the tariffs, our working capital loan program could provide short-term relief and offers flexible terms if that's something that is a fit there. The other thing that we've done is we've not only added brand new assistance such as the working capital loan, we've also adjusted some of the existing ONB financial supports to really try to help mitigate impact and increase market access for companies. So just a few examples of where we've made changes. So doubling the maximum contribution for a productivity funding policy and for market development support, which is basically travel into market. Contingency planning related to disruptions in trade, contingency planning related to supply chain disruptions, which we are seeing companies already with supply chain disruptions, adopting new technological specifications related to supply chain inputs or market entry, and broadening eligibility to tariff impacted sectors, and also increasing threshold limits, I should say as well. So the funding that is new and the funding that has been adapted is really meant to help companies navigate this uncertainty right now, with tariffs looming, with retaliatory tariffs, and kind of navigating all the uncertainty. So that's really the goal with them. I wanted to put the export development team bucket on here too, because where it's not new, I wanted to really put a focus on what we can offer, because I think now more than ever, it's really important for us to be having conversations with companies. So as I mentioned earlier, and I think Tracy mentioned it as well, that we are focused on strategic export markets. So we've been working in India and France to grow those two markets for years. We have strong connections and networks in those markets, and we are ready to support you in those markets if that's something that is interesting for you. We are doing about 2 to 3 missions per year in each market. So upcoming this year in France, we have Vivatech, which happens in the summertime, and that's a technology show, one of the largest in the world. And we also have Polytech, which is an energy show coming up towards the end of the year. We just got back from France. We were at an industry show called Global Industrie in Lyon, and that's for manufacturers and manufacturers supply chain. So a lot happening on the France side. I mentioned India. We just returned from a mission, and there'll be another mission planned for in a few months as well. We've also done some virtual B2B for India, and we find that like having folks in those regions that are GNB, there for GNB or there for ONB has been a huge help for our companies. So please reach out if those markets are of interest to you. We also offer support programs that help for entering other global markets. So Europe, Asia, and others. So I think what our plan is and how we execute is we have our markets of focus, but we also recognize that not all companies fit into that box. So if you're interested in another market, we can support you there. We have programs specifically targeted on Europe and Asia to help you enter that market, come up with a strategy, help you with regulations. So, and they're offered at subsidized pricing right now because of the tariff threat. So if you're interested in Europe or Asia, please reach out. We also have funding programs available right now there. So I want to mention here too that we're talking a lot about global diversification because it is extremely important. We have 90% of our exports in New Brunswick going to the US. So we have to diversify 100%. But I think at the same time, it's also really important to articulate that while we kind of amp up our efforts to support global diversification, we have to remain committed to supporting our efforts to continue to sell to the US market despite the challenges. We are hearing from companies that they are wanting to do this as well. They're wanting to weather the storm and keep those US customers, rightly so. So we as an organization endeavor to maintain those existing relationships that we have so strongly built, and we want to support companies continuing to sell there. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. At the same time, diversifying, but also not forgetting about the US partner that we've built up over the years. I guess to sum up this slide, I know I've mentioned a lot of different things, but the main thing is that, you know, every company is different. I kind of said everything at a bit of a high level. You can kind of get an idea of what our offering is, but I highly suggest that if you're not already talking to us, you're an exporter, to give us a call and tell us what your struggles are. And we can see if there's a fit for something that we offer. And if not, we can discuss, you know, alternate routes, or we can even connect you with someone that might be able to help. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So interprovincial trade barriers, Tracy talked a little bit about this, so I won't go into it in too much detail. She alluded to, of course, Premier Holt proposing the free trade zone in Atlantic Canada, and some of the barriers being brought down around labor mobility and liquor sales across provincial lines. So very happy to see this work already being done. I know that provincial and federal folks are around the table there and really pushing to have all of those removed. The barriers that are in place right now. I think what I wanted to say here is we want to encourage more Canadian trade at this time, and really always. I think we are so reliant on the US, we don't always think about Canada. So we're really trying to take a Team Canada approach, an Atlantic approach to doing more missions within Canada and creating more programming around Canada. So we recently launched a Canada Connects program, which is basically a virtual B2B program where we provide leads and meetings for New Brunswick companies. And so that is wrapped up, or it's almost wrapped up. There's 10 companies taking part. So we're going to assess its success and decide if we want to change it at all. And then we'll likely do other versions of that where it's simply B2B meetings is your outcome. So you tell the consultant what your goals are in the Canadian market, what your preferred province is, and they come up with qualified leads. So it's going very well. So I'm hoping that that we can run it again, as well as, you know, trying to bring companies into other provinces where maybe we would have overlooked in the past. I think that, you know, the Canada market isn't for everyone. It is smaller than the US significantly, and other global markets, arguably. So we understand that it's a certain stage in the continuum that works for Canadian trade, but we're here to offer and meet the need of that stage of company. Next slide, please. So supply chain is a really big priority for New Brunswick, and it has been for many years. We, little known fact, we were the first province to have a dedicated team focused on supply chains. That was introduced 2 years ago. So I think right now we're seeing that team has become even more vital in the last few months as tariff tensions rise with the US, and we're seeing companies impacted by some of these supply chain disruptions. So we're continuing to work to reduce barriers, first of all, on the public sector side, to try to make it easier for companies to sell into government, for example. So I would suggest that you look at the NB First procurement strategy, which could support you in selling to New Brunswick government. I also think it's important to think about import replacement here. So if your supply chain is primarily coming from the US and you're impacted by the retaliatory tariffs, you will have some big bills coming. So that can be a very scary and daunting thing. Our team is here to support you in trying to, you know, find alternate suppliers, whether it be in New Brunswick or in Canada. And also, are there things we need to tweak? Like, is there a company in New Brunswick that could support making the widget that you currently buy in the US, but they need our support to do that. Like, we're willing to do kind of unique approaches like that as well, where we're supporting two companies at the same time. But we want to hear about those challenges and kind of those unique situations so that we can try to support. Next slide, please. So export training, this is something that we've offered for years, that is not new to tariff response. So the export team works very hard to provide training where we see it's needed. A couple of things that are around the training space that I want to mention. The ATIGS group that I mentioned earlier provides access to the Launch Export program, which is for fairly new and potential exporters in New Brunswick to really get the lay of the land, meet partners, understand what it means to export, figure out where they want to go, market research, and then sort of an export plan. I would say it's probably a precursor to the Trade Accelerator program that Axel mentioned, which is also another great offering. So Launch Export is for a little bit of an earlier stage company. So similar outcomes maybe, but if you think about your level of knowledge, then that might help kind of decide which way to go. And our team can provide information on both of those programs. We also deliver training on markets. We bring in trade commissioners a lot from GAC. We recently did a training on free trade agreements and barriers to global diversification. So really helping companies understand free trade agreements, and they are not straightforward. We realize they're challenging, so we bring experts in to talk to companies and say, okay, well, if you're exporting to Europe and you want to leverage CETA, here's the 10 forms you need to fill out. Here's the steps that you need to take, because it's not always straightforward. And that comes back to that whole, how can we mitigate that risk for you? So more to come on training on specific markets and also on, diversifying markets in general. Next slide, please. So Tracy mentioned again earlier on the ONB Export webinar series, which has been hugely successful. If you haven't checked them out, I suggest that you do. They're all recorded. If you'd like the links to the recording, please let me know and reach out afterward. And the way that we build these out is we really take what we've heard from feedback from companies from one session to build the next and the next and the next. And we also recognize that there's a lot of information out there right now and a lot of webinars, and we're trying to fill gaps where, okay, maybe this is something that hasn't been talked about, and then we'll do a session on that. We had a panel of trade experts. I think it was the second webinar, and it was excellent. So if you check out any one of those, I would suggest you check out number 2. It was my personal favorite, and I think the most tidbits for companies. We'll be having another one at the end of April. We're just kind of planning the content. And we also collaborate with our partners as well on webinars. There's an Atlantic-wide webinar coming up, in fact, on tariff resiliency on April 15th. And we can share the link to register after the call for you. And I would say the business navigators are an excellent resource. They are really our key point person for companies with tariff questions. They have a dedicated team who's well connected with resources and are there to kind of steer you in the right direction. We're also very lucky to have some customs broker knowledge on our team as well. So while we can't act as a customs broker, we can answer a lot of questions that come about. So we're here to answer them. Please contact navigators if you don't have an OMB contact. If you do, please reach out to them, and we're really coordinating our answers so that all the questions that have come to us to date, we're having them in one repository with all the answers, so that if you have a question that's come up before, we can easily, share the answer with you. So I encourage you to not hold back there. All right, last slide. Awesome, thank you. Just wanted to include these links here because this will be shared with you after. We don't have any printouts on the supports because they're kind of changing and modifying pretty rapidly. So I wanted to put the links here so you can keep checking back. This is the Tariff Resources GNB site, which posts all of the upcoming news, supports, and highly recommend that you check that out. The second link is just a link to some of the supports that I reviewed earlier in the presentation. And then the third is just more information on the business navigators. So that's all I have. I know it's a lot. I want to leave you with, you know, we can offer a lot and support companies in many different ways. Namely, you know, some of the export pieces I talked about, some of the diversification. So highly recommend that you reach out, have a conversation with us, and we are happy to be there for you. We know this is a really challenging time, but we also know that we'll get through this. So thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alexa. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Wilson. I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. And as I look on the screen, it's so nice to see some familiar names. A little shout out to Bernadette Fernandez from St. John and Matt Nicole. Nice to see you both here. We're going to open it up for Q&A. I don't see anything right now, so I'm going to kick it off with a question. And I think, Alexa, this might be best suited for you at ONB. But my question to you is this. What are the resources that NB can export that are not currently being exported? And really the second part to that, are what are the possibilities for us as a province based on what you are seeing today?
Hi, it just took me a minute to get off mute. Great question. So I think the possibilities for us, I'll answer that part first. It depends on the segment of company. So I mentioned earlier that Canada is small. However, there's a large group of companies that are SME level that have the capability to export, that maybe are new to it and haven't exported before, but it's easier for them to export in Canada. The barriers are going to be lower, right? And the proximity, the cost, you know, the culture, things like that. So we want to really help facilitate some of that. Like we're planning, it's not out there yet, but we're planning a trade mission to Toronto in probably late summer, early fall, to bring companies in market and meet with partners there and see if we can, you know, make some business happen. But I think that's probably the number one, is the Canada trade piece. But again, I want to make sure it's clear it's not for everyone. It's for kind of that specific range of company. And again, the global diversification piece are for companies that can support that growth. And I think the biggest challenge in globally diversifying is that it takes time. It takes time. It takes resources, money. And right now we're in a very tough spot because we are kind of at the mercy of the news, and there's a lot of emotions at play. And I feel like that's coming in, but I think we do need to take a step back and think long term, you know, where could I essentially go? Maybe it's the UK or somewhere else. We are seeing some positive stories like this coming out that I can't really share the names of the companies, but we are seeing some companies with success like that. And they're like, oh, I reached out to the UK and I got a deal, right? So I think companies need to start thinking broadly, like if 90% of your exports go or 100% go to the US, start thinking about where could I potentially go, and then reach out and we can have a conversation about supporting and getting you there, because it's hard. It's very hard.
Thank you, Alexa. I think I speak, you know, from the 3 urban chambers when I say that we are hearing from, I mean, the tariff situation is changing by the second, by the minute, by the hour. We know that. And what we're trying to aim for is making sure that our members have access to the resources. So doing that background work for them so that we can kind of, you know, provide some direct information to help them navigate these uncharted waters and unusual times. So thank you for that. We know that ONB has really been doing a lot of work, you know, to help local New Brunswick businesses do that. I'm going to put one last call out for questions before I hand it off for our close. But I also want to mention today's session has been recorded, and we will be including it on the website, the Chamber's websites, for access if you want to go back and share it or watch it again. So much great information. So we just want to make sure that everyone has access to that. So we are at 12:40. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any more questions. And so my next task is to hand things off to the newly minted CEO of the St. John Chamber, the fabulous Shannon Merrifield.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, and greetings, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And as we are all aware at this point, diversifying trade isn't just a talking point, it's a strategic imperative for New Brunswick and for Canada. And I really appreciated today's overview on trade finance, how to strengthen our supply chains, open new markets, and position ourselves to compete and to grow. I felt that this discussion brought some really practical insight into how to expand our export partnerships, perhaps unlock new markets with some more confidence. And so with that, I'd like to thank our speakers, Tracy, James, Axel, Brian, and Alexa, for sharing your expertise and helping us think more broadly about where we're headed and how we can get there. And a special thank you to our colleagues from the Fredericton and Moncton Chambers, Morgan Peters, Kim Wilson, and your incredible teams alongside our wonderful staff here at the St. John Region Chamber. I believe that collaborations like today's events strengthens our collective voice, so we have more outreach and impact. And to everybody here who turned on their computer today, thank you for showing up, engaging, and being part of this important conversation. The private sector plays a critical role into driving this diversification, and your participation really matters. So with that, take care, enjoy your afternoon, and good luck. Bye-bye.